PUTZ Dies by Septimus Dale. The room is furnished in a bright, compact style. The colouring is easy on the eye. The chairs are well padded and modern, constructed on tubular frames. The walls are soundproof. The room is designed to offend no one. It is a death cell. The man sitting in the tin bath is called Jacob PUTZ. He is condemned to die. It is never a very easy business to bathe him, because he is paralysed from the neck down. He has to be lowered into the tin bath and the water carried to him in the large kitchen kettles. Stern, the junior of the two attendants, lifts him from the bath and lays him back in his bed. He is only a talking head on a pillow now. He cannot move his arms and legs. He cannot feel them. So he uses up his energy in grimaces. He grins. He laughs. He twists his face to emphasize whatever he is saying. His cheeks are sucked in and puffed out. His bushy eyebrows raised in comic gesture of despair. His thick lips creased with a frown. He lies on the bed in his ill-fitting prison uniform. He is quite a tall man. His face is round and fat, with chubby, rose-red cheeks, and little piercing eyes. A lock of brown hair slips across his forehead, a cow's lick. He lies staring at the ceiling, and he talks. He talks incessantly. He is eager to hear the sound of his own voice, to emphasize the fact that there is still a day to go, that he is still of this world, that his execution may never happen. Stern and Walther, the senior attendant, watch him. They are ordinary men, but they have an extraordinary job. They are paid to sit and listen to him, to keep him contented as a fatted calf, to play with him. Guessing games, 20 questions, chess. He liked to play chess at the start, but now he won't, because the game takes so long and there is so little time left. Experiments in pain, he says, his eyes tracing the shadows on the wall. My life has been devoted to experiments in pain. I believe in pain as the mirror of the extreme perfection of man's ability, the sublimation of the ego in the physical body, the resurrection of the animal, the supreme animal. His eyes flicker as he looks at Stern and Walther to see if they are listening to what he is saying. Stern sits at a card table, patience cards spread before him. He is young, but he is not new to the job. He has been with 10 men now. 8 of them were not reprieved. He is no longer impressed with his job or his customers. They pass like peas on a process line at a canning factory. He is not hardened to his job, he tells himself. He has merely developed a mechanical ability for ignoring the being of his customers. Most of his customers. This one is a difficult case. He lays one card upon another, and he grunts now and then, as though he were taking in what PUTZ is saying. On Wednesday, the tour of duty ends on Wednesday. For PUTZ, everything ends on Wednesday. He has agreed to take his little daughter to the zoo. He does not approve of zoos on principle, because he believes in the sanctity of wildlife. He finds the sight of a caged animal unpleasant, and he regards his own presence, outside looking in, as undignified and degrading. But his daughter wants to go very much. Her friends have all been already. He senses that going to the zoo has become a social caste mark in his daughter's life. and he is intelligent enough to realize its importance for her. So he will take her to the zoo tomorrow, Wednesday, after PUTZ dies. My experiments, PUTZ continues, unaware that he is talking to himself, uncaring anyway, because in his position he is alone in a prison that houses some 2,000 men, alone because he is unique. My experiments have been conducted under the supervision and with the direct approval of my government, with the aim of laying clear man's reaction to the physical ultimate, the repression of ego by pain and fear, the chemical reaction of brutality upon the defenceless. The shadow has moved a little across the cell. The shadow is cast by the sun as it shines through the bars of the little window high up on the lime green wall. PUTZ can count the time by the shadow. He could ask Walther or Stern for the time, but he prefers to work it out for himself, because time in hours and minutes has lost its meaning. His concern now has come to be reckoned in terms of time eternal, which he sees as a living thing, ungoverned by mental restrictions, which may be imposed upon it, hours, seconds, minutes. Time is the shadow on the wall. In the early morning it is narrow. As the day passes, it reaches its zenith, and then declines, then vanishes. Today he will watch it for the last time, because there will be no sunlight tomorrow. PUTZ feels Walther's gaze upon him. Walther is a large man, a man who has once been handsome. His looks have withered away, fallen into bags of sagging flesh, and eyes that water perpetually with the cold. They are soft brown eyes, gentle eyes. He is a gentle man, a man whose hands are made to caress. He is just a man. He blinks slowly, his eyes full of concern as he watches PUTZ. "You'd better rest up for a bit," he says. "You'll only wear yourself out." PUTZ grins. "My dear fellow, I'm conducting an experiment." "You do rattle on," Stern says from the corner. "I don't think we've ever had one that rattled on the way you do." "I'm conducting an experiment, I tell you, just as everything I've ever done has been in the nature of an experiment." He takes a certain pleasure in watching Stern's face as he says this. Walther has let slip that one of Stern's sisters was one of his experiments. "Oh, shut up!" Stern gets to his feet. He is clearly nettled. "By delicate use of surgery, without anaesthetic, I have observed the reaction of a man to his innards. I have fed another patient one of his eyeballs in a strawberry jelly." PUTZ paused, then observed to Walther. "My new experiment should be just as successful. I have no need to slit this man's mouth to his cheekbones. I only have to talk. He conjures up the rest." The head on the pillow nods contentedly. Stern looms over him, his fists clenched. "You bastard! You—" He closed his eyes, for the mocking mouth opens yet again. The thick lips twist into a grin. "Now, Officer Stern, restrain yourself. I had a job to do, so have you. I've done mine. Now you must do yours properly." "I can't take much more of this." Stern turned away. "I'll be glad to see this one go, Walther. You hear that, Professor? I'll be glad to see you frizzle tomorrow." "All right, break it up." Walther gets to his feet, putting a hand on Stern's shoulder. "That's enough of this." "By God, it is." "Go and get us all something to eat, Stern," says Walther, directing him to the door. "It's about time we had something." Stern goes out. "You shouldn't have done that," Walther says, coming to stand over the bed. "There's no need to make things any more unpleasant than they are already." "This is my experiment, Officer Walther. I just want to see how much the lad can take, that's all. It's another experiment in pain, if you like." "His sister—" Walther begins. "I know," the head on the pillow grins again. "I know. I can always have somebody else put on in his place. That would be a great pity. It might damage his chances, mightn't it? He should have mentioned his sister at first. They mightn't take too kindly to the omission. Bad for the lad's career, you know." Walther turns away. The fact that PUTZ was a war criminal makes very little difference to Walther. That PUTZ's perverted sadism had been practiced with official consent was regrettable. But he had come to live with the idea that such things could happen in wartime. After all, his customers were all specialists in the same line. It was unfortunate that Stern was personally involved. Stern's involvement was the only angle of the thing that affected him. But justice would be done. Stern would have his justice. As long as Stern had his justice, the balance of Walther's world would not be upset. PUTZ had been in charge of a prison hospital under the Sturton regime. An experimental hospital. With the simplicity of war, he had carried out his experiments in the nature of pain and the reduction of personality without outside interference. It made for a long and complicated trial. Complicated by virtue of the fact that most of the prosecution witnesses were so enfeebled or deformed, their bodies and minds so warped and diseased at PUTZ's hands, that they had difficulty in putting together a coherent account of their experiences. Some could be interrogated only by yes-no signals, made by the stumps of their limbs. Others could write with pens clenched in gumless, tongueless mouths. But they had succeeded in conveying an outline of life in PUTZ's hospital. The greater part of the evidence had been forthcoming from PUTZ himself. A PUTZ who had lain on his stretcher in court, watching his protégés being wheeled past him to the witness stand, grinning at their incoherent mumbling, their heavily veiled features. PUTZ had told the full story of his experiments with a note of pride in his voice. His suave tone had an almost hypnotic effect. His chubby rosy cheeks twitched into a grin now and then as he remembered the complicated and delicate operations he had performed. Now PUTZ is in the death cell. He is Walther's guest. He is a man of medical genius, a brilliant surgeon. He is a man who has destroyed Stern's sister. Walther is content that he is a man who is about to meet a just reckoning. A man whose time has almost come. PUTZ lies awake on the bed. The night is slipping away. There will be no other night, unless there is a reprieve in the morning. There is the chance, the hope. The barber has shaved his head. Walther avoided his gaze as the razor slipped over his scalp. It is Walther's job to keep the hope of reprieve alive in him. He knows that it is Walther's job not to let him despair, because it is easier to deal with a prisoner who thinks that it will not happen to him, that it is all an elaborate farce. It is Walther's job to keep him happy and docile until the last moment, when the governor will tell him that there has been no reprieve, that the law will take its course. He knows that there is no hope. He is interested in the fear that grips his body, a professional interest. He is interested in controlling that fear. People are bad at controlling fear. He knows that. They are out of practice in a civilized world. He had a chart on his office wall that showed the degree of suppression of different peoples. It was one of the things they had shown at the trial, one of the things they had been barely able to understand. He knew how he, as a Slav, ought to react. There would be a chair, like a barber's chair, a control unit, a little metal crown that fitted his head neatly, a fitting on his right ankle. There would be an audience, the governor, doctors, officials. Walther would be there with his watery eyes, and Stern, enjoying himself. It would be another experiment in pain. It would satisfy his curiosity. There had always been a doubt. Now he would know. This time he would be the subject of the experiment. He hopes that he will remain conscious long enough to register the extent of his own pain, his own fear. He hopes that he will register the fear of death on their faces as they watch the shock flicker through his body. Fear in their eyes, horror in their bodies. They are not mentally equipped to deal with the fear of death as he is. He watches the ceiling and repeats to himself that he is about to die. He is about to die by electrocution. 2,000 volts will pass through his body, and they will be left with the knowledge of his death which they have caused. They will press the lever. They have passed the sentence. They are afraid because he must die. He wakens and he knows that he has been asleep for a long time. He does not know how long. Now he is awake and conscious that it is morning. There are others in the room, and Walther is bending over him, touching his face to wake him up. He gazes at them. He twists his face to mock their gravity. The governor, the doctor, afraid. They are standing in a group around his bed, and the governor is opening his mouth to speak. And PUTZ knows what he is about to say, and he does not want to hear it. It is morning, and he does not want to die. He does not want to feel himself lifted by Walther and Stern, and carried down the passageway to the little steel door, and strapped securely into the chair with a crown fitted on his head. He twists his head on the pillow, turning away from them. He does not want to know that he is about to die, that there will be no reprieve. He will not listen to them. He is only a head on a pillow. Soon his scalp will be scorched. It is therefore my duty to inform you that a stay of execution has been granted. Owing to the nature of your physical disability and the natural reluctance of the state to execute a man who is no longer in full possession of his faculties. It has therefore been prescribed by the Minister of Justice that you be admitted to the State Prison Hospital at Corblans, and your sentence commuted to one of imprisonment for life. The eyes are upon him. The doctor is relieved. The governor's face is dull and placid. Walther wears a startled expression. Stern has turned away. There it is, the governor says gruffly, shuffling his papers. Another compromise, PUTZ. A political measure. In my opinion, a miscarriage of justice. My only hope is that the other prisoners, wherever you go, make your life as unpleasant as it can possibly be within an institution. Sir, Walther says in a shocked voice. I know, Walther. I know the rules. No personal comment on the decisions of the... I know. You don't have to teach me my job. The governor turns from the bedside and walks to the door. I know, Walther. I also know that this man does not deserve to go on living. This is the one man in my time here that I would have enjoyed dealing with. PUTZ begins to laugh, and his laughter follows the governor down the corridor, past the steel doorway, echoing and re-echoing, a mocking, contented laugh. He lies on the bed, and his chubby face shakes with mirth. Well now, Walther, he chuckles at length. All things come to an end, don't they? He suddenly grew serious. Because of my physical condition, they're soft, Walther. You're all soft. You're afraid to face up to killing. I never postponed an operation for a thing like this. He gestured at his inert body. That's why you'll never make a race of scientists. You haven't got the guts to go through with things. Stern slumps into his chair, his face bloodless. Walther speaks to him. "Where do we go from here?" There is a tone of bewilderment in his voice. "Poor Officer Stern." The voice crows again from the bed. "Poor Officer Stern isn't getting his treat after all. What a shame, what a shame." PUTZ's head rocks back and forth on the pillow in triumph. "Poor Officer Stern." "Shut up!" Walther roars at him, his soft eyes growing hard, his decision taking form in his head. "Well, if the senior officer isn't losing his temper too, another successful experiment. I never thought I should succeed with you, Walther. I'd quite given up hope." Walther towers over him. "Easy, Walther," says Stern from the side. "There's nothing we can do about the bastard now." Walther turns away. "It's time he had his bath," he says coldly. Stern looks startled. "I didn't think we'd need it this morning. I haven't made any arrangements." Walther smiles. "That's all right. You get the bath out and put PUTZ into it. I'll go and see about the water." Walther leaves the cell and goes down the passage towards the kitchen. Stern is alone with PUTZ. "You don't dare touch me," PUTZ says. "You keep off me." Stern snorts. "I'm not your sort, old chum. Don't worry. I don't enjoy that sort of thing. Your sort of thing. Soft," says PUTZ, sneering. "Too soft to get anywhere." Stern ignores him. He lifts PUTZ's limp body from the bed and places him in the tin bath gently. He is determined to regard the man as an object, to forget what he has done. He forces the thought of his sister from his mind. It is a job, that's all. He will do his job correctly. He has no right to personal vengeance. So he lowers PUTZ's body into the bath and stands by watching as Walther re-enters the room and crosses to the bath as he pours the first kettle of boiling water down into PUTZ's upturned, grinning face.